Happy Tuesday, everyone, and welcome back to our No Code Ops live community show. I'm really excited to see so many people joining us here from the very first minute. Usually, you guys kind of drop in throughout our events, but I'm really excited to see you here. I wonder if that's got anything to do with the big news that we've been dropping yesterday and today. But if you are here, because I can see you, let me know in the chat who's actually watching us today. I often like to say that we like for our events to be as interactive as possible. So do engage with me, with our guests, and keep those questions coming. And if this is your first time here, we're No Code Ops, a global community for professionals working in the operations field who leverage the power of no code and automation to scale up in their career. And so we've been inviting influential guest speakers from the no code and automation space to help you get equipped with those very fundamental skills. And so today is no different. We have Dmitry Shapiro, CEO at MindStudio.ai. And so I'm just going to pull him in. Hi, Dimitri. Good morning, because it's morning for you. You're in California, right?
Indeed it is. Yes. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm so happy to have you here. I was just saying that, I have the knowledge and empowerment of my community members very close to my heart. And so I really appreciate when influential people like you dedicate their time to come and teach our communities. So thank you so much for being here with us today. I was looking at Mind Studio a little bit, and I know that your topic today in particular is going to be geared towards building custom solutions, custom business solutions that perform. But before we dive into the technicalities and your presentation, which I'm sure is going to be awesome, I would like to learn a little bit more about you as a person, because I'm sure there's a ton that we can learn from your experience. I see that you're ex-product at Google, CTO at MySpace. Oh my God, MySpace. I used to use MySpace back in the days. 3 times venture-backed entrepreneur, all the things. You're a great inspiration. So where did it all start?
I was born in Russia in 1969 and moved to the United States when I was 10 years old. And in 1984, my dad took me to see this movie called War Games in the theaters, and I watched that movie, and right afterwards I was like, I gotta go find a computer. We were extremely poor, so we couldn't afford a computer, but fortunately my high school had 2 Apple IIe computers, and so from the age of 14 on, I had no social life in high school. I spent my days staring at a monochrome screen. And so that's where it started. And then I went and got a degree in electrical engineering, although I've never done a single day of electrical engineering. I've always done software, although I've never studied software development, so just all self-taught. And yeah, before starting Mind Studio, I was at Google for 4 years, where I ran product on a number of teams that were sort of processing all of this data that Google has about the world and about people and trying to synthesize it. All, of course, using machine learning. Prior to that, I, as you mentioned, was the CTO of MySpace Music. And then before that, built a big YouTube competitor called VO Networks, raised $70 million for that in venture capital. Before that, I built a venture-backed cybersecurity company called Iconic Systems, had over 2 million deployed enterprise seats, raised $34 million for that. In the mid-90s, from 95 to 99, I built the web team at this big Japanese company called Fujitsu. So these days, I describe myself as an old nerd.
A full rounded nerd, but I love that so much. And there were a lot of numbers there, lots of great accomplishments. Congratulations. But I guess my question would be now, what's the drive? What keeps you interested in this business, or what motivates you?
Hmm. Yeah, I have a I have this oftentimes I joke that it's a curse. It's a blessing and a curse. Some people when when their minds are sort of at steady state, they think about sports or entertainment or whatever else. Mine always is sort of chugging on. Oh, we could do this and we could do that and we can do this. Like in its rest state, my mind is like iterating on various sort of producty things. And my co-founder Sean Thielen is sort of the same way, and so we're really driven by like, oh, when we have an idea that we really believe in, like we have to go build it and just sort of get it in front of people and
I
you know
love that. I love
do
that,
it. So
and it
I'm
makes you
not
a
sure
very
how I could ever
creative
quit.
person. It
Yeah,
ma
I'm not sure how I could ever quit because that's sort of like my fascination. It's like, oh, would people like this? And like, would this make things better? And what would happen if we gave people these tools? And Sean and I don't actually, we joke, we don't like building products. We like building platforms. And so if you said go build like an e-commerce service and it does this, like I find that kind of boring. But if you say go build a platform that allows other people to build e-commerce services, well, I can get into that. And Sean is the same way, and that's kind of what drives us.
I love that so much because you can't really put that on pause. If you have that drive, if you have that creativity and just the will of putting that product in front of people because you've tasted what it feels like having an impact, you can't, you get addicted to it. That's why I love building communities because people just give you that addiction.
It is exactly like that, in fact. Yeah.
I
Mhm.
love it so much. And so let's talk about the topic of today. I can see a few people in the chat. Hi, Nicole. Thank you so much. She says, interested in the topic. Congrats on the news. Appreciate that. And so, yeah, speaking of the topic, I guess where you were talking about when you have an idea, you have to build it. What was the motivation behind Mind Studio?
Mhm. So I've been working either in or adjacent to AI, machine learning for over a decade. And there's been lots of amazing things that have come from all of the work in, again, quote unquote AI. But the launch, kind of the public availability of ChatGPT and sort of the very clear signal that we are entering this new phase of generative AI and that it will be extraordinarily impactful and disruptive and create sort of massive opportunities to rethink pretty much everything that we do as humans using information technology, especially. Um, Very quickly, again, primarily Sean and I, and of course the rest of our team, but uh, started seeing that there was going to be sort of a need for the types of things that we like to do, which is to create sort of democratization of new technologies, right? How do you let sort of more people use them? Um, and whatever, 2 years ago, when ChatGPT launched, almost 2 years ago, uh, it seemed that sort of the world was going down this path of believing that it sort of didn't need democratization, that itself is the democratization because it's just a chat interface. And all I got to do is just tell it what you want it to do with your thumbs, because most of us are on mobile, and it just does it. And it's like, do my job, please go. And it like says, here you go, I got your job. You're a marketer. I'm going to create a bunch of content. And that was very clear to us that while that's like sort of an interesting way, obviously, of like thinking about things, that's actually not very practical. That this interface, the chat interface to AI, is a extraordinarily limited interface, right? Um, it's a serial interface. It requires typing. It requires human thinking. It requires sort of knowledge of prompt engineering, right?
Hmm.
Whatever that is.
Whatever
Uh,
that is,
and
yeah.
so we very quickly, again, sort of we see the world and sort of through certain lenses, obviously, and we saw this opportunity to create this broad platform that is model agnostic. We bet very early that OpenAI was not going to run away with everything, even though there's many people that sort of believed that was going to be the case. We believe there was going to be many different types of models by many providers, and that the right sort of place to draw the lines is sort of in this layer of sort of orchestration, the application layer of AI. And so I typically describe kind of like what we do is there's like the infrastructure layer, which is where you get GPUs and data centers and like all the innovation of like hardware and software and all that to run the infrastructure, training, compute, inference, yada, yada. Then there's sort of on top of that sits the intelligence layer, which is where all the models sit and any type of model, large, small, language, image, whatever. And then on top of that, there's the application layer. And MindStudio is really the application layer. I mean, there will be other application layers too, but we're, let's say, an application layer that sits on top of all of this, that is model agnostic, that is infrastructure agnostic, and allows, you know, non-technical people, business users or developers, it doesn't matter, but non-technical people, to, you know, rapidly create, to sort of package the intelligence layer into things that are valuable to them. And those are typically, you know, applications and automations.
Yeah, I love that so much. The democratization of tech is something that obviously the no code movement has initiated, but it's been, you know, people have been trying from even before that was a buzzword. And so I feel like it's necessary to sort of tame and package AI in a similar way where actually people don't just use it on the surface. Like, you know, most people use chat GPTs nowadays. Like we just scratching the surface of what's possible. So it's really interesting to see how you're working towards kind of creating more complex application in a way, but that could be utilized by the majority of people out there.
Yeah, we're seeing really an innovation. In fact, maybe we can use some of my slides
Yeah,
here.
should I bring it in?
Sure, and then I will. I'll skip around maybe quickly.
There you go.
Yeah, and so, you know, anyone can go obviously to mindstudio.ai and play around with this thing. And generally, we describe MindStudio as a platform for building AI-powered applications and automations. Oftentimes, the most common thing that people say is we're like Zapier for AI, but specifically for AI, right? You can build applications that are to be used by humans, and so they've got, you know, screens and forms, and you can build applications that sort of don't have human interfaces, that are headless, that expose APIs and are meant to be called, by, you know, programmatically by other things. Again, kind of like a Zapier. It's really straightforward how to use it. There's this, you know, web builder where you arrange different types of components in these workflows and configure these components. Again, anyone who's used no-code platforms will very quickly understand how these interfaces work. And there are lots of YouTube tutorials where you can go super deep into this and to sort of the various facets of it. I'll give an overview a bit later if people want to see sort of high-level overview of this thing. And so this is really the slide I wanted to point out, which is what you were just saying. And I think this is like really important. The way that all of us were introduced to generative AI is to think of it as like this thing that we chat with, right? And this thing is like really quote unquote smart and can do all kinds of things. And if you know how to ask it to do those things, again, prompt engineering, then it can do those things for you. And so a bunch of enterprises, you know, meaning when I say enterprises, I mean organizations of all types, sizes, industries, et cetera. Early adopters kind of jumped into it and said, this is great. We want productivity. We want efficiency. We want quality. We're going to give our employees access to these large language models and teach them how to use them. So like teach them, you know, prompt engineering techniques and say, go. And, you know, here comes productivity. Yay. And then, by the way, you know, very quickly they started to realize as they were sort of looking at like what employees were doing and sort of evaluating these things is that this sort of gain in productivity that was expected, some like massive gain, sort of isn't there in that type of approach. Why? Well, because employees have to think about things and then have to type them. And then, you know, the model returns something and it's not quite right. And so the employee sort of keeps working with the model to get the right output, where the employee could have just done the work themselves. And so you start to compare of like, oh, they could have done the work themselves, but instead they supervised this AI doing the work back and forth. And now potentially what we get back is not necessarily something as good as the employee would have done, because the employee is just sort of playing editor. and it took pretty much the same amount of time. And so again, we get to see, you'll see here in a second, we have over 80,000 of these AIs that have been built and deployed. So we said it's sort of this vantage point that we get to see into lots of organizations that have gone through this process and sort of unanimously, kind of this first part of like teach employees to use ChatGPT or other models and let them go. Unanimously, this is not, sort of reporting back is not a big increase in productivity. Okay. Then they tend to go out and try to license and implement various vertical SaaS solutions. So there's one for writing, for example, like Writer or Copy or Jasper, or sales gets its own, marketing gets its own, HR gets its own, and then sort of train employees to do that. Same thing, again, the companies that end up coming to us tend to have gone through that step already and sort of realized that they're not seeing those massive productivity gains there either. And our value proposition to them is like, look, instead of cobbling these things together, it's really straightforward to build these custom, AI solutions for your organization, because every organization is different. And when you build solutions that sort of fit like a glove, like it's in that nuance where you find the productivity gains. And so this is typically the evolution that we get to see in organizations, again, by the time they come to us. We now have also over 200 integration partners that are helping organizations implement these things. You can do it yourself, or you can, hire some of these partners to do it. In these 80,000 AIs, again, there's many, many different types of applications. On our website, we bubble up some patterns that we see and sort of separate them by job functions. Again, mostly these things fall into applications that are specifically made for a job function, that a human that's sitting in whatever product marketing now has a new application, and they interact with that application because it's got screens and forms, and that application does a bunch of heavy lifting for them. And things that are, automations, either partial automations and complete automations. And really that's where the market is moving. You'll see here in a second. Like it's always been the belief, right, with human evolution is that, when humans get better tools, we become more productive, right? Power tools. And so that makes sense.
I love those sort of illustrations, by the way.
Yeah,
The evolution of the human. I was expecting somebody really with a curled up on their neck and their iPads.
exactly. And I think this is the thing that now with generative AI, we are seeing, I think, kind of the end of this, where we're seeing that the human becomes the bottleneck.
Hmm.
Right? Where it used to be that, the tools for whatever reason were, difficult to use or had limited capabilities. Now the tools are extraordinarily powerful, but the human is still the problem. Humans have to think, humans have to type, humans have bad days, yada, yada. And so again, some of these early adopter organizations that have gone through those other phases that I already described, including building a bunch of custom applications using MindStudio for their employees to use, are moving on kind of to the next step. And I kind of describe it in this way. The Industrial Revolution, right, kind of transformed how we manufacture, products, and started off by creating better tools for humans to use, and creating workflows where you had a sort of separation of skill sets on an assembly line. Sort of assembly line moved and humans did all the work. Now modern factories are extraordinarily automated, and I would argue that you could sort of describe them as being machine driven and human assisted, where machine does the majority of the work, and when machine needs human, that's when human participates in the process. And those types of endeavors are extraordinarily efficient, consistent, measurable, yada yada. They're extraordinarily productive. But when you look at the typical knowledge organization, right, an office, it feels kind of like chaos as compared to a factory, right? That's rarely automated at all. It's human driven and tool assisted. And I kind of put here that human driven SaaS assisted. So we give humans more and more tools. There's some stats out that there's, the average organization has now over 100 different SaaS products that they use. And then humans sort of are trying to use all these different products, move data from one thing to another, coordinate with other humans. and again, this is where you start to get these bottlenecks. And so as we move forward, again, we're already seeing it, and I strongly believe that we are moving in knowledge work from human-driven, tool-assisted to AI-driven and human-assisted. And so knowledge works will be much more like a factory, like a modern factory, than like an office. And
Humans are messy APIs.
that's right. And that has sort of a bunch of sort of ramifications of like, what do humans do in that kind of a thing? I mean, does the office change? I believe the answer is yes, meaning a marketing department. And I've actually recently written a couple of articles on LinkedIn that people can find. Feel free and add me on LinkedIn or scan these QR codes where I've sort of documented some like sales process automation, marketing process automation. And so in this kind of a scenario where the AI does the majority of the heavy lifting, the job of humans is to participate in the process and observe the AI in sort of different steps and give AI feedback and sort of fine tune it. And so humans become editors and fine tuning agents rather than the sort of using their minds and fingers to do the manual work. And that's sort of a quite a different way of again leveraging human intelligence. And this sort of my last slide here is one of my former chief financial officers that I've worked with for over 15 years once told me that the best business is a PO box that receives checks. And of course, this was sort of a bit in jest, but also I think is poignant because this is really the North Star in this world that we're all living in this world of AI, where intelligence and sort of the cost of intelligence is sort of asymptotically going down to zero over time. The power of it is exponentially going up. And so it's going to be, competitive advantages are going to be efficiency, productivity, intelligence, speed. How quickly can your organization catch new opportunity waves and things like that? And we're kind of in the middle of all of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. And I know every Tuesday, so today we usually host our live streams on a Thursday, but today's Tuesday, and every Tuesday we host our community hangouts in our Discord. And so one of the questions today, we usually discuss, various topics. We have a range of different types of professionals in the community. And so one of the questions today that was really interesting was, what's the state of business, nowadays? Or what are the challenges that you're encountering nowadays as a founder, but also, as a human professional utilizing these tools?
Well, so look, when you're running a startup, which is what we are, venture-backed startup, you've got, certain types of challenges. And when you're running sort of mid-market companies, you've got different challenges. When you're running enterprises, you've got different challenges. So running companies has always been a challenge. We've seen, over the decades, this thing that's typically called, digital transformation of organizations, where it used to be, and I remember those days, like I'm old enough to remember, that only giant enterprises had access to information technology. You needed like mainframes, right, and terminals. And if you were a medium-sized company or certainly a startup, you never had access to that. And then we got the PC revolution. All companies bought PCs for their employees, and then we sort of evolved from there. And we had many waves, right? We had mobile, and we had cloud, and we had SaaS, and we had the internet showed up in like many waves. And now this is and by the way, with each one of those, there's sort of a demand and a necessity for organizations, if they want to compete, to sort of keep leveling up the capabilities of their organization. Again, all those capabilities have been give better tools to employees. And it was all sort of about get the best employees, give them the best tools, train them to use it, and then, hopefully you win. This new phase with generative AI is another one of those sort of big waves of digital transformation where it is clear, although some people still question because we just went through this Web3 shenanigans over years where they're like, oh, well, you guys said
What
this.
happened to Web3? Is that still
um, Unfortunately, it seems it is. um,
somewhere in the
yeah.
net?
And yeah. In fact, today there was a story that Andreessen Horowitz, giant venture capital fund, is supporting Donald Trump because of his stance on crypto regulation. And so Web3 is still with us now, influencing our politics.
Politics. Great.
Forget about that. The AI, generative AI, is here to stay. It is not a fad. And I certainly encourage anybody who's listening not to fall into the trap of thinking, "Oh, I can just sit this one out." You can't. But this one is different because of that thing that I pointed out, where even though you can use it to give employees better tools, and they can be dramatically better and custom, and you should do that. It doesn't stop there, because as soon as you do that, what you will find is, when you probably do that first architecture of like, let's give employees new AI-powered tools that we built for them, custom for our organization, what you will find is more inefficiency. You will start to say, well, this thing that employees doing, we actually could automate that too. And now we can get employees doing different things. And I think that's the biggest difference now. And all of us will need to rethink how we think about building companies. Like, what kinds of job functions exist? Like, it's easy to rattle off what kind of job functions exist in companies till now, right? You've got a administrative, sort of executive. You got HR, right? You got product, you got engineering, you got UX, QA, marketing, operations, analytics, yada, yada. We all know what that's like. But in organizations that now are mostly, again, primarily going to start to get autonomous, where humans are fine-tuning the autonomous processes, do you still have marketing? Is it still separated from sales? Or is this simply sort of a dimension of your process that's working? And that's still unclear.
Yeah, that's really
We're starting to
interesting,
see
because
people doing that.
something else that we also talked about during our hangout today was how professionals were noticing or hoping for an increase in kind of niches. So you could become more of a niche solution engineer towards a particular realm of one of these fields that you're mentioning. I wonder if that's something that you think as well. Like, are there going to be more niches and opportunities for people to specialize on, or are we going to face a sort of streamlined world where we do merge some of these roles into maybe a one function?
I think both. There's certainly going to be merging of roles, and I'm also certain that there's going to be opportunities for specialization in, again, kind of the fine tuning of different parts of the automated process that's running, right? Um, for example, if you've automated, marketing, and you've got sort of a process running that is sort of enumerating the various potential permutations of an ideal customer profile. These things we used to call personas, that was
Hmm.
always clear to me are just like sort of crude caricatures of the types of people that might buy your product. None of those people actually exist. Well, we don't have to live in that sort of crude, limited fidelity world anymore. AI can truly identify nuanced states of people that could use your product and create custom messaging for them, and sort of like get them to grok what it is you're selling and why it makes sense to them. And it, again, can sort of do that by intelligence, and also sort of like sheer force, just lots of iterations over these things and testing. And then, typically there's sort of a checkpoint that you would want to implement for like a human to sort of look at that and say, oh, yeah, this AI is now finding these new types of multidimensional personas in this messaging. And, it's performing in this way. And yes, this looks good. Or maybe I can nudge it to also try this, because I, as human, have sort of this instinct that this type of a persona that might not have yet been enumerated and checked and clear, I want to nudge it in that way, sort of like pointed to that. And having this ability to have sort of human instinct and insight and creativity, again, even though I believe that you could argue that generative AI models are specifically creative. What does it mean to be creative? It means to create new things, right? And so they do that all the time. But like this human creativity, I think becomes extraordinarily valuable. Now, the question becomes is how many of those do we need in an organization? Where we used to need a lot of humans doing the work. Well, now the AI can do the work, so we don't need humans doing that, but we need potentially fewer humans, but doing really important work. And I think there people can excel. And I actually believe that most of that comes sort of like gut instinct becomes the skill, sort of talent, vision, less
The intuition,
heavy
yeah.
processing, you know.
Yeah, the human in the loop is definitely something that should always stay, in a successful company, and especially, in automation companies. We can't just assume that things are just gonna run and do their own course. There has to be a human in the loop to kind of give that final touch that you were mentioning. I
Mhm.
know that I switched on the Q&A sign. I know that there's about 40 people watching us live right now. So this is your chance to interact. You have a great mind here. So take this time for you to get some value out of this conversation as well. Interact, ask your questions in the chat. And Dimitri, I know that we also talked very briefly about, or we just mentioned prompt engineering, right?
Mhm.
uh, Anyone who, because I know I have lots of friends who work sort of traditional roles, maybe teachers or different types of professions that are not necessarily connected to technology. But most of them have asked me how I would like to learn a little bit more about AI, or how to maybe start introducing AI into my day-to-day job. Is there anything that you would like to say to somebody who might not necessarily be in the field, or even those people that are in the field, but how can we um, r- learn about it in a way that we can use it professionally? And
Mhm.
prompt engineering, is that a role? Is that something that people can foresee as a career, or just another Web3?
Definitely not. Meaning, this is my opinion. Obviously, we'll see if I'm right, but I don't
Mhm,
see prompt engineering being a role at all.
mhm,
And in fact, sort of again, prompting, this thing we call prompting, which is like writing commands to AI, is a small piece of leveraging the power of AI, right? And typically not the piece again where you're like typing them on your phone and asking AI to do things. I think the right approach for anyone, again, teachers or anybody else, if they want to understand where the world is going and sort of have some skills that allow them to leverage these new technologies, kind of like learning to use a computer, back in the 80s, right? Like so anyone can use it. You don't have to be in the industry to do
mhm,
it. This is something everyone should generally understand how it works and how you can take advantage of it, right? Is really straightforward. So, I always recommend YouTube as being a great source. Go and watch some videos. We have a deep learning section on our website and on YouTube. Um, where we now have over 20,000, subscribers and lots of videos. You can go and all of that material is like super accessible, meaning to understand. You don't need any technical skills. Anyone in any role, meaning in any industry, in any job function, should be able to push play and sit there and watch this and grok it and sort of within 15 minutes start building AIs and understand, again, the limited role of prompt engineering, where that fits, of like, where you need to type some things. But mostly the skill set you need to learn is like, where should you use generative AI and how do you sort of implement it? How do you use it? And again, that's really straightforward. It's a function of being able to understand what it is you're trying to get done, breaking it up into steps, a
mm,
workflow, and then configuring all of those steps. And some steps might call an AI model, one type of an AI model. Other steps might not call any models, might just do some logic comparison or have menus or whatever. Other steps might call other services that are not AI models, web services, do a Google search or query a relational database or vector database, whatever, and then call maybe a different model. And so again, MindStudio is model agnostic. We support any model, like right out of the box. We support 37 models, from OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, Mistral, yada yada. but you can connect to, a bunch of larger enterprises today are using their own private models. They're running their own, on-premise inference or in their own private cloud. You can connect to those as well. You can call, functions via JavaScript. And so like all of this can be learned. And once you, again, understand that you can take the sort of raw material of intelligence and then quickly put it together to do something for you, then you as teacher in the classroom all of a sudden can build your own tools that allow your classroom to operate, potentially radically more efficiently, giving you more time to spend with students and not have to do a bunch of administrative work, for example, that you had to do before. Like, why do that? But
Absolutely. And
talking to students.
I think you were totally right when you were saying identify what the problem is, right? Identify what kind of solution you would like to build, break it down into little steps, because that's the key. The amount of people that people ask, the amount of times that people ask me in the community, oh, I would like to build something, but which tool should I learn even before, they start thinking of what it is that they would like to build. And so our very first prompt, I guess, for the community, it's always been, what kind of solution are you trying to build? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Because there's such a plethora of tools and opportunities out there and learnings that you can get, but you have to know very clearly what it is that's stopping you right now. What's that friction? And so then you can see how you can automate it, whether AI makes sense into the solution you're trying to build. But I think that identifying the problem and breaking it down into little steps is the key, even before you start exploring all these opportunities here. And we have a complimentary comment for you by Team. Team says, as a MindStudio certified agency partner and MindStudio certified AI expert, I can say that Dimitri and the team at MindStudio are pushing the tech in the right direction. So that's a great comment for you.
Yeah,
We
we're we're really excited about the community of certified developers and integration partners that have shown up, and again, started servicing the need of organizations that are wanting to build with MindStudio, but potentially don't want to build these things themselves or want to get there faster. And so we've seen, again, sort of this huge opportunity for service providers to show up, learn to use it, and go service this sort of practically infinite need, because every organization needs this digital transformation, needs to compete in this new world, needs to become radically more efficient in their operations. And it's just starting. Even though we've got these 80,000 AIs deployed, that's like a drop in the bucket of like the demand that's out there. And so it's like, for those that are sort of enterprising folks that want to get into the business, it seems like the most obvious thing to do is to learn to build these AI applications and automations and service the need of any type of organization that
mhm.
this is where all the sort of budget dollars are flowing. There's been Gartner, Forrester, all sort of reporting that other projects are getting robbed and budgets are flowing into AI digital transformation. So it's an amazing opportunity to build new businesses or take existing agencies and integration partners and sort of level them up into doing AI work.
Absolutely. And we have a question from Gabriel from LinkedIn. So hi, Gabriel. Not He says, not sure if it's a silly question. So Gabriel, there's no silly questions here. Feel free to share. This is your opportunity to learn. Can MindStudio be used to create or lay the foundation for a standalone separate app or web app outside the MindStudio ecosystem? For example, eventually compile into an iOS or Android app, etc.
Yes, great question. Yes, people are already doing that. So as I showed you earlier, you can sort of build two primary types of applications. One are applications that have human interfaces, screens, forms, input, output for humans, and others that are headless, that expose APIs. And you can think of them as like backends or components, pieces of application that you can then put together and programmatically use. And so there are indeed people who are building things in MindStudio, again, components or entire backends, and then putting, native mobile interfaces in front of them, packaging all of that up, submitting it into the App Store and Google Play Store, and sort of MindStudio sits in the background, as backend services that are doing the intelligence, and the rest is mobile. When you publish the applications, by default, they're web apps. And so you can do anything you can do with web apps. Like there are thousands of websites that embed, using an iframe, embed MindStudio
Mm.
applications in their existing websites. People are embedding them in Notion, right? You can obviously attach them to physical things because you can give them a QR code. You can send them. It's a link. It's a web app. You can put them on your home screen as progressive web apps, and have them on mobile. So it's super flexible on what you can do with these things.
Amazing, amazing. And another question here from Shane. Hi, Shane. Great to see you here. He says, "Thank you, Dimitri. I'm looking forward to delving into MindStudio in more detail. Is there a white label option for the ability to customize critical AI functions for a specific niche?"
I'm not sure of what kind of a white label I think you're referring to. There is no white label of sort of the platform of MindStudio, meaning the builder and that. But you can create accounts that are, team accounts, for example, on MindStudio, and you get these collaborative workspaces, and those are, you can name them and put your logos, and they are your workspaces, and so it feels like it's part of your organization, behind your firewalls and things of that sort. So in this case, it's sort of white label, but like we don't white label the platform itself. You use the platform to build applications or build these collaborative workspaces that have applications.
Amazing, brilliant. And as we wait for a few more questions to come in before we wrap up shortly, is there maybe a roadmap you can share for Mind Studio? What are your plans for the future? Are they secret?
Uh,
Are
they're
you planning on conquering the world?
they're not secret. We really like to build in public, and so we tend to sort of point to where we're going. Um, One more of the same, meaning we've kind of sketched out this broad surface where this is this horizontal solution. It's industry agnostic. It's organization size agnostic. You have this infinite canvas onto which you can create these different, workflows and arrange various components and get them to work together. Today, we've got a bunch of different types of components that you can add to these workflows and automations. We're going to expand on those capabilities, so more types of things that you can do, easier to do them, etc. Today, we support what we call data sources, which is the ability for you to give us a bunch of data, like 5 million words at a time, excuse me, up to. And then we take them instantly, turn them into vector embeddings, store them in a vector database, and allow you to query them in sort of retrieval augmented generation fashion. We next up is creating what we call persistent data sources, where you can just tell MindStudio AIs of like, I've got data that lives in these different places, and I want you to access this in real time or to sync on some interval. So that's sort of in the super near term. Next up. As I mentioned, there are already a bunch of organizations, mostly larger ones, that for whatever reason, they are in regulated industries and have compliance needs or other things where they don't either trust the cloud or have
Mm,
limited trust of the cloud, where they need to run their own AI models. But
hmm.
today, we say, great, if you've got a model, you can connect MindStudio to it. But some of them come to us and say, well, could you help us build the model and sort of implement that? And we're not in the business of doing that, although a bunch of our integration partners are able to do it. In the near future, certainly before the end of the year, again, kind of announcing it here, we will make that trivially easy for organizations to do, kind of just like you can provision, although I'm not sure I should say when talking about AWS, if anything is trivially easy for those that have ever tried to provision anything, hopefully we'll make it even easier than that. But you should be able to, from the comfort of your computer, make some configurations and deploy a private cloud model or models and automatically connect MindStudio to it. And so like this sort of democratization of AI model deployment in private clouds integrated to this, workflow builder is sort of the next thing up. And then sort of a bunch of sort of enterprisey, better enterprise dashboards, better enterprise business intelligence that's AI driven, sort of lots of things. We're nerds. We do
Always
this because we love
building.
it. Right. So we're driven by like, oh, let's build this because we love it. And that's kind of how we operate.
I love that, and I like that you touched upon the security issue because that always comes up whenever we talk about AI, and I wonder, yeah, how do you tackle that? People, you were saying companies kind of building their own internal solutions. How do you just tell them that's great, so you can integrate with MindStudio, just like what you just said, or how do you deal with that kind of security and AI battle that we have?
Yeah, I think the the concerns that people tend to air about security and privacy, and they tend to sort of conflate those two things together typically,
Mm.
uh, mostly stems from, again, the mental model of that AI is this thing that lives in the cloud and you send it your data and it sends you back responses. And then the questions become, well, is data safe in transport? It is, right? We've been doing SSL for a long time. You should be able to trust that. Is data safe when it reaches the destination? And are those service providers with whom I'm communicating? So OpenAI, which is basically Microsoft and Google and Amazon and whatever, maybe some sort of startups that aren't sort of part of these like clouds yet. Do I trust those? And are they going to use this somehow in training of their models, and might information leak? Or are these things sort of compliant by the way that we've been thinking about regulations? And so I think like those are the places where people have questions. Mostly we point out to them that it's a function of architecture. It depends on who you are and how you architect these systems, where you need to potentially pay some additional attention to, implementing some sort of new capabilities in your stack that, you know, maybe do sort of data obfuscation or use some synthetic data, or, sort of do derivative privacy policies. So there's like a bunch of things that need to be taken into account.
Hmm.
But generally, I believe, and I tell organizations, that if you're using reputable providers and you're not sort of doing anything weird, that this doesn't really introduce any meaningful vulnerabilities to from a security standpoint or privacy standpoint.
Yeah, brilliant. And
By
Dimitri,
the way, that was my first love in computer science. As I mentioned, I watched the movie War Games, and so that's
yeah,
why I spent my teen years doing Econix, the company I built, again, that had over 2 million enterprise deployed seats, raised $34 million, was a cybersecurity company, built a perimeter security gateway. I'm still like super current uh, on cyber tech, and yeah, this is not something I think that people should be overly worried about, as much
okay,
as you can not worry about security.
great. I just Googled that film. I was like, I have to watch this film now. It's like 1983. Awesome. And Dimitri, I respect you so much, your professional insights, and just was, I feel, so honored that you shared this hour with me here today. And you're building a lot of solutions for people around you, for the world. You're putting a lot of passion into what you do. It's clear. I can tell. Um, is there anything that we can do for you? Like, what can the ecosystem do for you? What do you wish to see more of in the whole no code automation AI world out there?
Mhm. One, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this time with you, and I appreciate the compliments. Um, I, again, being the nerd that I am always excited. Sean and I like to build, again, these tools for other people to use. And so the thing that excites us is when people show up and use them and say, "Oh, I hacked it to do this," or "I hacked it to do that." And the community of no-code builders that you have would be perfect community to show up and sort of push the limits of the platform, that helps us figure out where the limits are and to expand it and grow. We're extraordinarily responsive to the community. We have a community of our own that's very active. We get sort of praised quite a lot on social media about our support and training and all of that. And so we just welcome more people into using this and helping us all, make everybody's lives better. Like, people tend to have this sort of allergic response to, like, oh, hold on, you're going to automate me out of a job.
Mm.
I think, but not realizing that the opportunity isn't to get disrupted by the job. The opportunity is to go up the stack and do more interesting work. Like, there's not less need for humans. There's more need for humans to do more interesting work and not do mundane work that they've been doing, repetitive things, day by day by day. You show up every day and you kind of do the same thing, move things from one system to another, and you write some things, and we can all do better. And once we automate all of this mundane stuff, well, then we'll level up. And then collectively, we will realize we have like incredible opportunities to solve some of the world's biggest problems when we're not just moving things from one system to another. And so I'm really excited about that.
Absolutely. I love that so much. I love the fact that you're also facilitating and inviting people to connect more and make the most of their time, and having, as you were saying, the mundane work kind of being automated at the back. That's so important. I love your projection for the future. More human interaction and more work being automated. I really hope that that's what we're heading for, towards. Love that. And hopefully we'll contribute to that mission with our communities. I really, really hope so.
Yeah,
But this has been
congratulations
fantastic.
on the news.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not sure. We keep referring to it as the news. I suspect everybody knows that you guys got acquired by Zapier. As I mentioned, people tend to describe MindStudio as like Zapier for AI. And indeed, Zapier is used quite a bit in the integrations
Hmm.
that people are building, because Zapier today has all of these amazing integrations with 6,000 plus applications to create triggers. And so triggers are typically created in Zapier or whatever. I mean, some competitors make MuleSoft, whatever. And then components are built in MindStudio, the AI pieces. And so these things are like chocolate and peanut butter. And so I'm excited that you guys are joining Zapier, and hopefully we'll continue to work really well together, and hopefully even grow.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, this has been just the first time that I've met you, and I'm very intrigued, and I love your work. So I'm sure there'll be room for us to collaborate more in the future.
Thanks so much.
Amazing. Well, everyone else here at No Code Ops, thank you so much for sticking around. And a few key takeaways: watch war games tonight, right? That's that's key takeaway. Don't be scared by AI. Learn how to use it. Security is not such a big issue. And what's a final key takeaway? Because actually, me and Dimitri were talking about just being very concise and bullet points. That's where we're also heading in the future. So one last bullet point for the audience:
Vote.
vote. Very important. And not for cryptos. That's it. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. I think this is it for the before the summer in terms of our live streams, meaning I'm going back home for a well-deserved break. That's what everyone keeps telling me. So we're breaking off for the summer, and I'll probably see you again in September with our live streams. But yeah, stay tuned for all the news. Thank you so much, Dimitri. Have a great rest of your day and take lots of care.
Enjoy your vacation.
Thank you so much. Bye,
Take care.
everyone.